Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, welcome to day 3 of the National Director meeting. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to this plenary session on capacity development, opportunities and impact. Dear colleagues, the mine action sector has undergone an impressive evolution since its early days. As the normative framework grounding all of our work emerged and strengthened, the sector has grown increasingly professionalized, innovating and adapting in line with the changes in the operating environment. Amidst this evolution, the focus on national ownership and capacity development has emerged ever more strongly as a priority. Over time, it has become clear that for mine action to be effective and produce sustainable results, it would have to rest on strong, adequately equipped and resourced national structures and institutions in charge of their programs. I dare say that the country-focused approaches developed within the APMBC and the CCM are a further testimony to these developments. Let us take stock of lessons learned and reflect on what it means today to develop capacities, to assess progress, to tailor capacity development to national needs, and to generate adequate support at the international level. We will address these and many other questions together with our distinguished panelists, whom I'm very pleased to introduce. Oksana Leshchenko is Policy Specialist on Mine Action at the Crisis Bureau of UNDP. She has over 20 years of work experience in policy development, knowledge management, resource mobilization, and program management in international settings. Oksana also has a significant field experience in post-conflict settings, particularly in the areas of recovery and community reconciliation. Valon Kumnova is Chief of Mine Action Programs at the GICHD. Valon has worked for the ALO Trust for 20 years. He has set up mine action programs in Sri Lanka, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Georgia, and managed operations in Cambodia, Mozambique, Abkhazia, Azerbaijan, and Somalia. Valon has also managed policy, strategy, operations, strategic partnership, monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning, and external relations. General Jihad Bechaalany is the director of the Lebanese Mine Action Center. He has an extensive history in mine action, starting from the Lebanese Armed Forces Engineering Regiment. With the support of France, the EU, and UNDP, he established the Regional School for Humanitarian Demining in Lebanon, focusing on capacity development in mine action across affected countries in the region. Linh Nguyen is a Provincial Program Manager for Norwegian People's Aid NPA in Vietnam. She has 12 years experience in mine action, 8 of which are in operational and program management roles. Linh was one of the key people involved in the development of the cluster munition remnant survey methodology and in the establishment of Vietnam's first all-female battle area clearance team. I, by the way, had the pleasure of sharing an event with the United Nations Security Council recently with Linh, so it's very good to see her here today as well. And finally, Christian Rydning joined the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2015. He was posted to South Africa prior to this current position in Geneva. Here in Geneva, Christian covers disarmament and humanitarian affairs. Dear colleagues, before we start what promises to be a very interesting discussion, let me briefly remind you that this event is being recorded and will be available online after its conclusion. If you would like to ask any questions, please submit them in writing through the meeting platform. And now, without further ado, let me start with the first question to our panelists. And the first question will be for Oksana. Oksana, a general question. Why is it important to focus on capacity development in mine action. Oksana, may I turn the floor to you?
Thank you, Ambassador. Mine action is and will remain a long-term endeavor. As Ambassador already mentioned in his introductory remarks, national ownership and capacity development are crucial in mine action, irrespective of context. Because over the long term, mine action is most sustainable and effective only because of national ownership and capacity development. Now, at the United Nations Development Program where I work, capacity development is at the core of the mandate of this agency, as well as in the UN strategy on mine action, and for the entire mine action sector as a whole. Now, going to definition of capacity development, we think of capacities as the full set of resources and assets that are available to be applied toward the resolution of a problem or the achievement of a particular goal. This means that capacity development needs to be far more than just a training. It is a dynamic and systematic process of learning, strengthening, and adapting that aims to make the response to a given situation more effective and responsive to the needs of stakeholders. Now, going to the question, mine action. Why capacity development is important for mine action? If the vision of the mine program in any given country is to save lives and release land for safe and productive civilian use, a corresponding vision for a capacity development programming could be for the country to have a national mine action capacity that safely delivers results for civilians, functions effectively with minimal external support, and that the confidence and that this program has the confidence of all the stakeholders involved. Maintaining a capacity development program that will be effective over the long term will require methodical and focused response and engagement with all the stakeholders throughout the process of implementing this program. It should consist of a balance of short-term actions and long-term transformative goals of all the stakeholders involved. And that can only happen if it is jointly developed with all the counterparts through the consultative and interactive process. Therefore, finding and maintaining this consensus on the overall direction of the program will require ongoing engagement. So the capacity development process and building national ownership will not end. It will have to be sustained throughout the process of program implementation, which applies to mine action programs in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oksana, for these points. Very important indeed. Let me move swiftly through the next question. And this would be a question for Valon. Valon, what are the key aspects that enable success and sustainability when developing national capacities? Could you tell us about this, please?
Thank you very much, Stefano, and it's great to be part of this panel discussion. Well, the sector has now supported capacity development for well over 2.5 decades, and along the way we have learned many lessons, as you said in your opening remarks. What categorizes as success and sustainability is very important here. When we talk about developing national capacities, as Oksana says, it's important to understand from the onset that this is a long-term commitment and endeavor. Generally speaking, when we develop sustainable national capacities, it's important to think beyond just training and deployment of staff. The key ingredients towards success, in our opinion, are institutions, which should create an enabling environment for the development of capacities. Under this category, one needs to think about mine action laws and legislation in countries, political will from affected state and donors, upholding of the norms, appropriate positioning of mine action authorities within the country's government structures, and affected countries' government commitment to national ownership. The second aspect is the processes, which generally lead to a successful capacity development program. These generally include development of solid baseline needs assessments, where the needs of capacity development and the means to deliver them are identified. Development of national strategies where the affected country creates a coherent plan to deal with its problem and create an opportunity to link mine action with broader agendas. National standards which enable the safety, efficiency, and effectiveness of the operations. Information management to capture and disseminate accurate information. Impact monitoring evaluation which accurately articulates our work beyond square meters towards the sustainable benefit we are delivering, and the important cross-cutting issues such as gender diversity and inclusion. And then finally, it's the capacities, which relate to both building capacities and capabilities of people and developing appropriate tools for the job. In this endeavor, the continuous training of personnel and engagement with the national capacities plays a key role. It is very important to listen to the national authorities' needs and not impose agendas when providing support. With regards to the tools, it is very important that the appropriate tools are made available to enable capacities to function appropriately. This aspect is very important as far too often we see scenarios where there is insufficient support and investment in tools which are critical component to deliver a successful mine action program.
Thank you, Valon. Thank you for this. Institution, processes, capacities as key ingredients. Excellent points. Let me move to the next question. That would be a question to Linh. Linh, may I ask you, based on NPA's experience in Vietnam, could you provide a concrete example of the factors that you believe enable success and sustainability with respect to capacity development? Linh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. So based on NPA experience in Vietnam, there are three main factors to ensure the success and sustainability of capacity development. So first, it's very important to work at all three levels that as Ms. Valon identified. So in Vietnam, we are providing capacity development support to VNMAC, the Vietnam National Mine Action Center, the database units, and the Mine Action Center in Quang Binh, Quang Tri provinces, and to project news local partner for our survey and clearance project. So this helps us to reach those different levels and support coordination and communication between different national actors in Vietnam. And secondly, capacity development intervention have to be understood and supported by all stakeholders to avoid competition or overlap and encourage coordination, and is help with open communication allow everyone to contribute toward the same outcomes. An example for this is that in Quang Tri, we have regular coordination meetings with all stakeholders where results can be shared and challenges can be discussed. It's also important that there is political will for capacity development. So in Vietnam, we are lucky that we have strong leadership from provincial authorities who provide input into and oversees for all of NPA capacity development activity, as well as all other mine action activities. And finally, I would like to particularly echo Ms. Valon's points that capacity development requires long-term and sustained commitment from donors. It isn't something that happens quickly. Resources must be dedicated to allow national staff the time required to develop the skill they need and be allowed to test this in their position. For example, in Quang Tri, NPA has been providing capacity development support for the database unit since 2012. And this has taken many forms: workshop, in-field practice, on-the-job training, frequent feedback from other operators, and so on. This could not have been possible without the long-term support from the U.S. Department of State. The high capacity in the database units could not have been developed over a short time or with one single type of activities. So thank you. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Linh. Thank you very much from this perspective from the field. You mentioned different points. Let me emphasize in particular this issue of cooperation and coordination with all stakeholders to work towards the same outcome. And I think here that connects to the point made by Valon on strategies. Then the issue of political will, but also the long-term and sustained commitment from donors, reflecting the fact that building capacities is indeed a long-term endeavor. So important points made here from a field perspective. Thank you, Linh, once again. Let me now move to Christian of Norway, maybe to bring in a donor perspective to the discussion. Christian, may I ask you, what does capacity building mean to Norway as a donor? No, Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for having Norway and myself on the panel. I should start by just subscribing to what's been said already, that national ownership is the foundation for any kind of effective and successful mine action. The states provide the framework for those who operate on their territory. They need to credit those working there. They need to do the information management, give strategic guidance, perform quality control, and so forth. So having a national capacity to take that ownership is indispensable, at least as far as humanitarian demining goes, and I assume there's not many who disagree with that. So how do we as donors then approach this? I think I can give you three examples. The first is capacity building through the operators. They have the know-how, right? They would do the work, they clear the mines, they do the risk education and the surveys, so they know what it takes in practice, and they know what they need from their governmental and local counterparts. And what is more, they also work in all kinds of countries and speak to all kinds of governments and communities. So they not only have the expertise in the subject matter, but they have this comparative perspective. The Norwegian funding model is that we work primarily through the international operators. So of the 35 odd million US dollars that we spend on humanitarian demining per year, they will get the lion's share of that. And of those, the NPA, the Norwegian People's Aid, are the largest recipient. So I suppose I'll take them as an example, and we've already heard some of how they're thinking. And what we have with them is a very flexible framework agreement. So that means in practice that they set the priorities for the work that they do in any given country. And our experience is that yields the best results, because based on their very informed contextual understanding, they will prioritize the capacity development that they deem to be necessary to operate in the most efficient manner. And what that means in practice varies, of course, from context to context. It can be training programs, or it can be equipment transfer, or something as mundane, maybe as having regular conversations with the relevant local partners and governments, just setting off or aside the time for that. And one of the things that the NPA pointed out that I want to just emphasize is that we mustn't stare ourselves blind on the capacity building at the central level, but also focus on capacity at the regional level where the mine action actually takes place. And the second example is what we as donors can do ourselves in our own right, so to speak, and that is by taking on the role as champion donor. And an example to share there is the when Norway championed the creation of the Mine Action Forum in Lebanon in 2016, together with the Lebanese government and the mine action community there. I mean, it may sound fancy, Mine Action Forum, but it really isn't. It's about starting a regular dialogue and gathering all the stakeholders around one table. So you have the government, the operators, the donors, maybe some civil society participants, and from the UN, where they are. And to promote shared understandings, really, of the challenges that are faced and where we want to go, basically, so that everybody just pulls together in the same direction. And it might sound simple and banal, and in a sense it is, but surprisingly, that kind of institutionalized, regular national dialogue between all the stakeholders is still lacking in many places. And Germany mentioned the other day that they're doing this work with Bosnia and Herzegovina government and partners there to create the country coalition. In essence, I think we're talking about much the same thing there, and it's yielding good results. And the third and last example is capacity building through other NGOs and the operators, because there's so many organizations out there in the sector that have expertise that complement the capacity building work that we do through the operators. And the GICHD, for whom you work, of course, is one such, with vast expertise on how to improve nearly all facets of mine action. And then we currently fund a project on risk education, which is a priority of ours from the Oslo Review Conference, where we try to increase the quality of risk education and to make it a more central component for mine action programs, because, as you know, it saves lives, especially where you can't do clearance in the short term. And then just the last point there, when talking about the GICHD, it's you work not only to develop the capacity of the affected countries, but of the sector more generally. And I think that's an important aspect of capacity building that we often forget when we focus so hard on the national dimension of this. There is capacity building to be done internationally in the donor states, in the NGOs, and in the diplomatic community to which I belong. And myself, I've had lots of good experiences, and it's been very useful to talk to you and other partners in the mine sector to do my work, and which also includes being on the Article 5 committee of the Mine Ban Convention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian, for these thoughts of yours, these comments of yours. Interesting comments indeed. Also, the cooperation that we need to generate as a constructive one between national actors and international actors. And the concrete examples, for example, of the Mine Action Forum as a way to realize that, but then other aspects as well. So thank you so much, Christian, for your comments. Let us now move to the next question, and this question would be to General Bechaalany. Hello, General. Good to see you. General, may I ask you? Hello. May I ask you? After more than 2 decades of mine action, the capacity of affected states can be expected to be largely in place. So how can we best ensure that capacity development takes national circumstances into account and is tailored to outstanding needs? So once again, how can we bring in this component of national ownership and ensure that we work towards where the needs are? The floor is over to you, General, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefano. Good day for everyone. I'm going to give my answer in Arabic, in my own language. So, السلطة الوطنية أو المؤسسة الوطنية التي تعنى بالألغام المتعلقة هي شريك أساسي ضمن دائرة نطاق أصحاب المصلحة. وإذ أخذنا بعين الاعتبار أن الأعمال المتعلقة بالألغام هي عمل طويل الأمد لا ينتهي مع تحرير الأرض الملوثة المعروفة، بل يستمر أبعد من ذلك للتعامل مع الخطر المتبقي، تصبح السلطة الوطنية أو المؤسسة الوطنية الركيزة الأساسية التي تضمن حماية مستدامة من خطر الأجسام المتفجرة. التجربة اللبنانية عمرها 23 سنة. ابتدأنا مكتب لنزع الألغام في العام 1992 بدعم من وكالات الأمم المتحدة، ثم انتقلنا بعد 9 سنوات لنصبح مركزا متكاملا قادرا على إدارة عمليات نزع الألغام. هذا المركز الجديد كان في العام 2007، لا يزال يانعا قليل الخبرة في التخطيط وإدارة العمليات. هنا يبرز دور بناء القدرات والدعم المؤسساتي الذي رافقنا منذ ذلك الوقت عبر جهات دولية عديدة وبدعم من برنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي. الأمر الذي جعل الخبرة لدينا تتقدم حتى أصبح المركز اللبناني في موقع ريادي على الصعيد العالمي. في نظرة شاملة لهذا التطور يمكنني الجزم أن بناء القدرات أمر أساسي لكل برنامج وطني. في بدايته يحتاج البرنامج الوطني إلى الخبرات الدولية وإدخال أفضل الممارسات إن لناحية الإدارة، تخطيط، تطوير، تنظيم ومراقبة، أو لناحية العمليات المنفذة على الأرض. لكن أيضا مع تقدم الزمن وزيادة الخبرة لديه يبقى دور بناء القدرات أساسيا لجهة الدعم المؤسساتي. فالبرنامج الوطني في أي دولة لا يمكن أن يعيش بمعزل عن العالم. تبقى الحاجة دائما لإدخال خبرات خارجية، برامج إدارة المعلومات الجديدة، تطوير منهجيات العمل. الجمود هو أمر غير طبيعي، والبرنامج الوطني إن بقي في حالة جمود يعني أنه سيتراجع. لذلك فبناء القدرات هو أمر ضروري مهما كان عمر البرنامج. من ناحية ثانية عندما يكون البرنامج الوطني في طور العمل الاستباقي proactive يكون حجم العمل كبيرا ويتطلب مركزا كبيرا من ناحية القدرات والكفاءات والموارد، كما تتطلب أعمال التنظيف من موارد تتخطى قدرة الحكومة الوطنية لإتمامها. هذا البرنامج الوطني يبقى بحاجة إلى الدعم المؤسساتي، بناء القدرات، إلى زيادة الحفاظ على مستوى عال في الإداء، ومستدام يضمن وجود إمكانية وطنية قادرة على تطبيق سياسة الخروج أو الإكزيت استراتيجي. بالإضافة إلى ذلك من الممكن أن يكون المركز الوطني ذو الخبرة متقدم مركزا مساعدا في التطوير في الأعمال المتعلقة بالألغام، تجري فيه دراسة متخصصة، دراسة الحالات، تجربة تقنيات ومنهجيات جديدة، تدريب فرق من البلدان المجاورة، وهو ما نقوم به بالتعاون مع UNDP وGICHD والمنظمات العاملة. وكل هذا لا يمكن أن تتم من دون دعم مؤسساتي هي رؤية المركز اللبناني في الوقت الحاضر. فنحن نسعى إلى مشاركة خبراتنا المكتسبة في إدارة البرامج وتنفيذ العمليات مع دول متضررة من آثار الإرسام المتفجر. وشكرا.
Thank you, General. And I'm sorry, I have to switch here from one thing to the other, so please bear with me. No, thank you, General, so much for your points. And you made a very interesting point when you said that Lebanon has more than 20 years of experience and is now, of course, fully on top of its game, and that the international expertise and the support is particularly relevant in the initial phases. But then, since if one stops, one stagnates, as you said, there is a need to continue maybe to interact, for example, at the level of standards or at other levels. So you also mentioned the point of national authorities becoming then a reference point for others, which is also very important indeed. So thank you for this comment. Appreciate. Let us now move to the next question, colleagues, which is a question that I would like to submit to Oksana. And the question is specific to UNDP, and it would be, how does UNDP capacity development framework apply to mine action? Could you maybe tell us about this, Oksana, please?
Sure. Thank you, Ambassador. So UNDP has capacity development at the core of its mandate. And therefore, UNDP developed the framework for capacity development, which classifies capacities in 3 dimensions. The first dimension is enabling environment. So in case of mine action, this will equate to concrete legal elements such as the National Mine Action Regulatory Framework, National Mine Action Strategies, whether or not the country is a signatory to APMBC, and whether or not it permits international NGOs to operate within its borders. The second element is the organizational and institutional level. In a typical UNDP mine action program, capacity development efforts will be focused on the governance and functioning of the National Mine Action Authority and the National Mine Action Center with respect to prioritization, national mine action standards, accreditation, information management, quality assurance, donor relations, financial management, and so on and so forth. And finally, the third level is the individual level, which comprises of skills, experience, and knowledge that allows each person to perform. So in this case, the type of activities would be mentoring, on-job trainings, knowledge and individuals gain from experience in their field, building individual capacities over time. And UNDP has also a practice of collocating its mine action staff within national structures. It has proven to be a valuable tool for capacity building over time. And actually, Lebanon, the previous speaker, is the country where UNDP has been practicing this collocation. So all these 3 dimensions, the operating environment, institutional and individual, they all interact and influence each other in the continuous loop. Both the organizational structures of an office and the enabling environment will influence how much individuals will learn. and how much knowledge and experience is put toward making a meaningful contribution to overall goals and results. So this is the overall framework for capacity development of UNDP, but it is very much relevant and practiced for our work on mine action. Another element of this framework is the focus on developing functional capacities rather than focusing on particular tasks or goals. And finally, another very important element of this framework is that it identifies drivers of change. And these categories include institutional arrangements, leadership, knowledge, and accountabilities. So these 4 drivers of change are also mutually reinforcing, and they emphasize the efforts to strengthen capacities in one another. Thank you.
In a way, development is acted upon in manners that to some extent overlap, but to some extent also do not overlap fully. So, for example, UNDP, you mentioned that, Oksana, has this typical approach of collocating staff. And it is a very interesting point that you made here. And maybe if there is time at the end, we might want to come back to this and ask you about more about the concrete experiences you did with this. So thank you for your answer. Now let me move again to back to Ms. Linh, if I may. And Linh, I would like to ask you, what are, in your opinion, the opportunities to strengthen capacity development and improve national ownership? So the opportunities and a focus here also on national ownership. How would you say it, Linh? Can I turn the floor to you, please?
Sorry, can I hear the question again?
Yes, the question would be, what do you see are oh, no, I'm sorry. I made a confusion with the question. I apologize. No, the question is a different one. I take it back. The question is, has the sector focused on strengthening capacity in all pillars of mine action, or do you think that there are gaps? Linh.
Yeah, so NPA in Vietnam has tried to be as comprehensive as possible with the resources available, but of course there are still gaps. We focus on mine action, coordination, and management of mine action data, and internally by ensuring continuous transfer of skill and knowledge to our own national staff. NPA operational expertise in Vietnam is mostly in survey, clearance, and LD, so we try to use this operational experience to inform capacity development activities. So the support we provide is based on practice, not just theory. So we also try to focus on transferable skills like data management, coordination that can be applied to other areas. For example, even though NPA support the database units in Quang Tri province on the data analysis, starting with analysis of surveys and clearance data, they can now take those skills and apply it to the risk education of victim data. So we try to share experience in a way that the skill and knowledge can be shared across all pillars of mine action. Even though NPA and other capacity development partners have been implementing activities for nearly 10 years, there are still large gaps in Vietnam. According to the Landmass Impact Survey, there are 62 provinces contaminated, but only a few have received capacity development support from NPA and other actors. So yes, there are large gaps in capacity and knowledge, and it will take some time to bring on other provinces up to the level of Quang Tri province. So thank you. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Linh. Thank you. This is very clear. There are a lot of work has been done, but there are still some gaps, which testifies to what was said earlier, that this is a longer-term commitment and endeavor, and we definitely need to stay at it. So thank you for this answer. Let me now move to the next question, which would be for Valon. And Valon, you might recognize this question since I raised it again, raised it before. What are the opportunities to strengthen capacity development and improve national ownership? Please, Valon.
Thank you, Stefano. I note we are running slightly behind time, so I will try and be as brief and succinct as I can. I think a lot of the sort of wealth of experience that we have cultivated over the years really present us with an important opportunity to strengthen national capacity and national ownership. All of us, of course, will need to do more work across the three areas I highlighted earlier: institution, process, and capacity. Oksana highlighted the same three areas, but in a slightly different terminology as well. And these three areas are intrinsically linked. One can't work without the other, and sometimes actually ensuring that the enabling environment is there is quite important before some of the other support is provided, before otherwise things could be counterproductive. Therefore, we have an opportunity as a sector to look at various contexts and apply the right sequencing of support and interventions, really working hand in hand with national authorities to ensure that we're having a sustainable impact. More specifically, during the difficult period of the pandemic at the GICHD, as you know, Stefano, we've learned a lot of alternative ways of working revolving around online and hybrid support to the national authorities. Throughout this period, we've learned that this presents a unique opportunity to reach to more people, more cost effectively and more frequently via these means. Of course, the work in person will remain essential when working to strengthen national capacities. However, alternative ways of work will complement this. With regard to the opportunities to improve on the national ownership aspect, it is important that affected countries also think about long-term risk management. We see in many countries where the work is almost finished that there is a need to develop long-term risk management strategies and capacities to ensure the country can deal with all the contamination. It is important to start thinking about this aspect early on in the life of the program and not really leave it too late. We have the opportunity to do so in many countries now. Equally, we heard during the NDM this week from HALO on day one on the plenary and from Danish Refugee Council on day two during the side event some interesting ideas and developments with regards to alternative funding modalities. As these develop, national authorities will need to play a central role, in our opinion here, which presents also an opportunity to gradually strengthen the national ownership. There's obviously lots of other opportunities, but in the interest of time, I'll leave it there. So Stefano, over to you.
Thank you, Valon. Thank you very much for these good points. I'm aware that we are a little bit beyond schedule, but we will try and continue our conversation. And I would like to now go back to Linh, if possible. Linh, the question would be, through the example of NPA's activities in Vietnam, what are some of the ways to measure progress in capacity development? Because this is an important topic. We all talk about capacity development. How do we measure that exactly? Could you tell us how this happens in Vietnam, please, Linh?
Yeah. So not only NPA Vietnam, but NPA globally has developed a system to measure the impact of capacity development activities and the progress made by the capacity development partner. So it's largely based on assessing how well the authority or provincial center meets UNMAS obligation. So first, we established a baseline of existing capacity and the end state, which is always full national ownership. And based on the baseline, specific activities and projects are developed to move the capacity development partner towards UNMAS compliance. So over time, the outcome of this activity are monitored using a traffic light system to indicate the level of capacity existing and therefore the amount of capacity required. So on evaluation and future planning is done through coordination meetings with all stakeholders, so everyone can share their understanding and experience of the partner capacity level and also discuss any gaps or issue, or as well as future action plans. While we try to use evidence-based scoring as much as possible, and we also recognize that qualitative measures are just as important as quantitative. So, for example, in Quang Tri, there has been a steady trend toward increased coordination over the last 10 years, with it led by Quang Tri Marshall Center. This has had many positive results. More open data sharing, with results in operation being better planned and informed, and methodology improvements by sharing lessons learned and through joint analysis of operational data by all stakeholders. So these outcomes are difficult to track by using a traffic light system, but are equally as valid as a new SOP or a new technician certification. Over to you, Ambassador.
Very interesting. And there is really the question also of the indicators you choose, quantitative, qualitative, the role of IMA standards. Thank you for this answer. Let me move back to General Bechaalany. General, may I ask you, based on your experience, how can we ensure a robust exit strategy for international assistance and the adequate full transfer of capacities and responsibilities to national structures? You referred this a little bit in your presentation, saying that it is particularly important in the early phases to be particularly present. But could you tell us about the exit strategies? Ambassador, General, the floor is yours.
اوكي، شكرا. كما نعلم، كلما اقترب موعد الانتهاء من تنظيف التلوث المعروف وتأثير الأجسام المتفجرة على حياة الناس وتحقيق الالتزام الدولي بحسب المعاهدات، من الطبيعي جدا أن يبدأ الدعم الدولي للبرنامج الوطني بالتناقص. تأتي أهمية سياسة الخروج أو الإكزيت استراتيجي كوثيقة تؤمن انتقال منسق وممهد إلى إدارة وطنية كاملة. من الصعب جدا وضع تاريخ محدد لخروج الجهات الداعمة، إذ أن ذلك يرتبط بكثير من العوامل. لذلك تبرز أهمية وضع سياسة خروج بطريقة مشتركة بين السلطة الوطنية والجهات الداعمة. الأمر الذي يجعل أكثر واقعية وضامنة لاستمرارية فعالية البرنامج. الركيزة الأساسية في هذا الموضوع هي وجود استراتيجية واضحة وواقعية للبرنامج تعكس توقعات الجهات المانحة وإمكانية البرنامج. هذه الوثيقة تبين التواريخ المحتملة لمراحل البرنامج كافة: مرحلة التنظيف، مرحلة انتقالية، مرحلة العمل التفاعلي رياكتيف، فتكون بالتالي هناك فترة متوقعة بشكل واضح تستطيع فيها الجهات المانحة الانسحاب من البرنامج بطريقة آمنة تدريجية تسمح للسلطة الوطنية بأخذ المسؤولية بشكل كامل، وبذلك تكون قد تمت المساعدة الأفضل للبرنامج لتحقيق الهدف الأسمى بالسرعة الأمثل والامتثال للمعاهدات الدولية. بالتوازي مع ذلك، من الضروري العمل على بناء القدرات الوطنية بشكل يسمح لها بتسلم كامل المسؤولية مع انتهاء التنظيف. من هنا يمكن الحديث عن مرحلتين أساسيتين. الأولى هي انتقال الدعم المادي من خارجي إلى داخلي ضمن فترة العمل الاستباقي برو-أكتيف. هي فترة انتقالية أولى، لكنها فترة حساسة، إذ أن أي انسحاب سريع غير مدروس قد يعرض البرنامج ككل إلى إطالة موعد انتهاء التنظيف. وألفت النظر إلى أن البرنامج اللبناني يعمل دائما على إشراك القطاع الخاص فيه لتأمين دعم داخلي له. تليه بعد ذلك المرحلة الثانية، الانتقال إلى العمل التفاعلي رياكتيف. فيها تتوقف الحاجة إلى عمليات البحث عن تلوث ويتحول العمل إلى مهمات محددة Rapid Response أو Task Spot Task عند العثور على أي جسم خطر. المرحلة الانتقالية المذكورة ولا سيما الثانية لابد أنها ستتطلب تعديل في تأليف المركز اللبناني للأعمال المتعلقة بالألغام، إذ يصغر الحجم البرنامج تدريجيا وتتحول متطلبات العمل فيه. فمع خروج الدعم الدولي من المتوقع أن المنظمات الدولية تخرج من لبنان مباشرة، ويبقى عدد محدد من المنظمات المحلية إلى حين الانتقال إلى العمل التفاعلي. تبقى الفرق العاملة في الجيش اللبناني الركيزة الأساسية للمرحلة الجديدة. إذن وحدات الجيش العاملة في مجال الألغام المتعلقة بالألغام مع منظمات المحلية تحتاج أن تبنى في مرحلة العمل الاستباقي لتكون جاهزة لمرحلة العمل التفاعلي. الجدير ذكره هنا أن المركز اللبناني قد وضع مسودة سياسية سياسة الخروج، ونحن نعمل على إنهائها بحيث تحديد للمرحلة الانتقالية لخروج الدعم الدولي. وشكرا.
Thank you very much, General. Thank you for this answer, and I think the Lebanese example is really an example to look carefully towards, also for others to take advantage of and to be inspired from. So thank you for these comments of yours. Colleagues, we have I think 10 minutes and I still would like to raise two questions, and I would ask my colleagues in the panel to be as to the point as possible. The first would go to Valon, touching upon an important point which has been stressed on many occasions here at this National Director meeting. And this is the point of sort of the triple nexus. So, Valon, how do you think that capacity development can support the link of mine action with broader agendas? I'm thinking here of the SDGs, of the triple nexus, of the grand bargain. What can you tell us about this?
Thank you, Stefano. I'll try and be as brief as I can. As you say, we heard during the NDM in several occasions the need to continue to do more to break the silos and connect mine action with broader agendas. This discussion is obviously not new to our sector and will continue to remain topical. However, as they say in UK, the devil lies in the detail, and the real test is how do we connect mine action with wider agendas. It is our belief that building sustainable national capacities and working with national authorities of affected countries is key, really, in this endeavor. From experience, for example, it is evident that countries that have a solid strategic plan that clearly connects with a national development plan, which in turn connects to the Sustainable Development Goals, ensures that the mine action actually doesn't live in a silo. So there are some concrete examples and experience that we can draw on. Going back to the issue of the grand bargaining and specifically localization, which was very well articulated by Mr. Annan on the opening remarks on day one. The recent issue caused by the pandemic have brought into sharp focus the need to accelerate the development of national capacities. This will not only strengthen our sector's resolve to develop sustainable capacities, but crucially, it will link it with the grand bargain's localization agenda, which in itself presents a good opportunity. Mine action should be, and I quote the Secretary General call at World Humanitarian Summit here in 2016, as local as possible, as international as necessary. In our opinion, national authorities need to have a stronger voice on everything that the sector does and lead the discussions on how to connect mine action with broader agendas. After all, they know best how to achieve this in their countries. I will leave it there, Stefano.
Thank you very much, Valon, for these points. I mean, you are, of course, and it's unfair towards you because these are big questions. I'm very well aware of that. But your point related to the connection between strategic plans, national development plans, and SDG plans, it's an interesting way to proceed. And then the issue of localization, there was a good discussion yesterday. This is a discussion that will need to continue for sure. So thank you so much, Valon, for these points. Let me maybe raise one final point with Christian. Christian, if I may, I would like to ask you, what kind of advice would you have for other donors regarding the issue of capacity building? So I put you on the spot here. Please do inspire and instruct all other donors.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. And I suppose I can say something about our experiences and what we find to have been fruitful, at least. I think one is, and I've mentioned this, I can be fairly quick. One is flexible funding for the NGO operators, because they know where the gaps are. So as long as you maybe agree and can do that on a highest level, set of goals and impacts, then let them invest the money where they think it'll give the highest return, and then it usually will. So that's one point. And the other is multi-year funding, and this all connects to the quality funding discussion, of course. But capacity building, as we've heard several times, it's a long-term undertaking. So it's not done in a day or a year or two. So proper capacity building will give higher returns over time. You have to give it time. So that's the second, and then the third, if I can just market this again, the taking on an active role as champion donors. I think that's an important point, to use that role of the convener that states have, and not by initiating just senior level government to government talks, but to include everybody, to include the operators and the other stakeholders, so that everybody's on the same page. And in our experience, donor states can facilitate, discussions about sensitive issues that the non-state stakeholders, that's difficult, might find difficult to raise otherwise. And we need the voices, the various stakeholders, and we need them to be frank, so because they know where the shoe pinches. So in terms of capacity building and institution building, I think that's the Mine Action Forum and the country coalitions. That's a niche, or at least an area where the donor states as such can have a very good, an important role. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Christian, for these points. Flexibility, multi-year, these are important issues indeed. They I would dare say, belong to a good donorship agenda, which is maybe even more important now in these particular times. So thank you for this point. And also, once again, you affirm the importance of champion donors and what they can play, those donors, in terms of maybe creating fora in the field to have everybody sitting around the table to discuss technical issues, but maybe also some more sensitive issues. So those are a really good example, and Norway has been pushing for this, and then is working on this, and I think we can all be inspired by that. So thank you very much, Christian, for this point. Colleagues, I'm so sorry, but I see that we only have 5 minutes left. And I'm aware that there were some questions that were raised in the chat. And we will come back. I think we will find ways and opportunities to provide answers to those questions. Rather not here, I'm afraid, but later on. But please allow me just to wrap up our discussion a little bit. You have seen we have tried to look into this issue of national ownership and capacity development from various angles, and from the perspective of different stakeholders. And I think it was a very interesting discussion, because it shared the way people see things from where they come. There were differences, of course, but also a level of overlap. So, for example, the fact that capacity development is a long-term commitment and endeavor. But this statement needs to be somehow made more precise in saying that the first phases of a program are the phases where a strong international cooperation and support is particularly relevant. That does not mean that it will wither away right away, but it is particularly important there. And then there are certain aspects in which sustainability would remain key. For example, the UNMAS, the International Mine Action Standards, they are a repository of good practice, and they are updated continuously. And so, as I think the General mentioned, there is always a need to keep up with that, and maybe to do that also in the frame of a cooperation. There is also technology updates. For example, I can speak for the GICHD in saying that in terms of information management, we have moved through different IMSMA. And so we want to keep in close contact with our counterparts to update them on that. Another point that was stressed was what I would call a multi-stakeholder approach, with the affected states in the lead. So this is the best expression of national ownership, but it ensures coordination and cooperation, which is important. Everybody's sitting around the table. And then it creates the right dynamic, I would say, between the national and the international level. And I think Christian has been referring to this with very concrete examples. And then measuring progress. How do we measure progress on capacity development? I do think that this is an important topic, also because we want to show that mine action is relevant on many fronts. Valon was referring to mine action contributing to broader agendas, the triple nexus, the SDGs. And so we need to see how exactly we proceed on that, which indicators we choose. And I think it has been said by Linh that it must be both qualitative and quantitative. And finally, and I close here, one additional point on exit strategies. I think the general said that very clearly, that it is difficult to put a specific date, but the exit strategy is something that all stakeholders should be able to come up with jointly and collectively, in order to ensure that this is done smoothly. So I'm afraid I will have to stop it here. I understand that I am to turn the floor to Christelle for further announcement. I just would like to thank once again wholeheartedly all the panelists and all you colleagues who have participated in this session. And I look forward to the next step within this National Director meeting. Christelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefano, for chairing this super important session brilliantly. I have the pleasure to introduce to you the next event. So we have 3 side events. It's going to be very difficult for you to choose. They're all exciting. The first one is on risk education, doing it right, doing it better, explosive ordnance risk education, voices from the field. The second one is approaches to counter the threats posed by improvised explosive devices, examples from Yemen and the Sahel region. And the third one is on the long-term impacts of explosive weapons in populated areas, implications for the mine action sector. So this will be the event from 3 to 4 o'clock. Then you will have a break for half an hour, and then we will meet again in plenary for our last plenary session on inclusion and diversity, racial equity in mine action. I hope you will enjoy the 3 side events, and we look forward to seeing you in plenary at 4:30. Thank you.